We take answers also. But I thought a good idea is to talk about staking and what proof of stake is, because I think you talked a little bit there about proof of work and how that is working, and yeah, proof of work is a very expensive and slow technology. Like, it cost me millions of dollars because I was against proof of work. I was like, it's so wasteful, it burns so much electricity. I waited until 2013 to buy Bitcoin, So, but today, 2% of all the electricity in the world is consumed by proof of work. So you guys obviously developed something much better. So tell us a little bit about proof of stake and why is it better and how does it work? Because I think a lot of people probably don't know what that means.
Yeah. So the big issue is the blockchain. At the end of the day, is a database. As Alex mentioned, it's actually the most expensive database. So if you ask most of the business world, what do they prefer? Low fees, privacy, high transaction throughput, or decentralization, high fees, lower transaction throughput. Most of the use cases, they would prefer centralized database. But I think there are unique places where decentralization actually adds a lot of strength and enables new kind of applications and gives a much higher trust. For example, Bitcoin is one of these applications, creating a new asset class. This is the first time that we have something that is digital, but it's also scarce. There wasn't such thing before. With the internet and the ability to send information peer-to-peer, it's okay to send an email to everybody in the room because it's just information. But when you want to send money, sending the same amount or the same transaction to two people, that's a big issue. You need to solve the double spend. So one way to do that was using proof of work. It's a computation that is done outside of the network to approve and sign the transactions. And there is the protocol rule that the longest chain wins. And it means that potentially 51% attack on the network, if you own 51% of the hash power, you can start changing transactions. But it's not necessarily in your incentive to do that because you spend so much money on acquiring this hash power, then losing the consensus will actually hurt a lot of the wealth that you're holding. So proof of stake takes a little bit of that similarity and says that if you own 51% of the stake, essentially you rule the consensus and you can change history or control transactions, but there's not much incentive to do that because basically if you're the biggest holder or a group of holders and they abuse their power, mostly the value will collapse, or they don't actually have an incentive to do that. And one of the advantages is that if we are able to achieve decentralization of the stake of Orbs, reaching 51% becomes very, very hard. So we are trying to achieve the same security and consensus as Bitcoin, but without all the electricity consumption. And one of the innovations that Orbs has is that we can scale the number of validators that are a part of the Orbs consensus without hurting the transaction throughput. So as I mentioned before, EOS has 21 nodes, Stellar has 21 nodes, they're very centralized. Ethereum has 18,000 nodes, so it's very decentralized but very expensive. What Orbs does, and part of their proof of stake model, is that we can scale the amount of validator pool to be very, very big, but each block there is a randomized committee of 10 or 21 validators that sign the block. And we can mathematically prove that choosing this randomized 21 out of a big pool of validators is actually more secure, but still achieves the efficiencies and the low cost compared to any other infrastructure.
Yeah, so I want to also touch on yield, right? Because I think the next 20 or 30 years, basically all the central banks in the world are going to push down the currencies. So if you think about the US dollar, or you think about the yuan, or about the yen, right, which is the three kind of, or the euro, right, the four kind of dominant currencies around the planet, they all have tremendous amount of debt on them, right? In Japan, debt is 300% of GDP. It's the highest in the world, actually. In the United States now, $23 trillion. The United States owes more to the rest of the world, right? Every person, I'm American, I owe over $200,000 to Korea, to Japan, to China. Each person, a baby is born, owes $200,000 to everybody, right? So it's unsustainable. The only way for the dollar to get out of that, or for the United States to get out of it, is to print more money and devalue the dollar. So anyone, like you said, anyone who keeps their value in dollars or in any other fiat currency is going to lose the value. If you take the Bitcoin against the dollar lost 99.9% of its value in 11 years. Right? By definition, if Bitcoin is at 10,000, the dollar stayed the dollar, it's lost all of its value because the dollar stayed the same. So the advantage of deflationary proof of stake currencies, right? I mean, think of Orbs for a second as a currency, is that they do work and they produce value, right? So they're completely disconnected from the dollar, the yen, the won, and so on. They don't have debt behind them. The opposite. Behind every Bitcoin, there's millions of dollars of electricity, right? It's a deposit. Everybody has to put money to make it. You either put money by mining with electricity, or you put money by buying it from somebody else. But either way, there's zero debt behind the Bitcoin, right? Versus the dollar that has billions and trillions of dollars worth of debt. So when you're looking at all these different coins, you have to look at them. Are they inflationary or deflationary? Like Ethereum is an inflationary currency. It creates much more Ethereum than, for example, Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is deflationary because of two things, right? One is the limited supply, so more people join, it becomes deflationary. And the second one, a lot of people lose their keys. Already 4 million coins have never been used, right? So that's really, the number is not going to be 21 million. There might be 21 million created, but the real number is more like 18 or 19 million because all these people lost their keys, including Satoshi, never used his 10 wallets, right? So that's 5% of all the Bitcoin is just sitting in 10 wallets that Satoshi Nakamoto is holding, right? So that's a deflationary currency because every day more and more people lose their keys. So the yield, like your yield right now is what, 7%?
8%.
8%.
So I think Bitcoin rewards the miners, but it's very hard to participate and be a miner. There is today just a few mining pools that are taking part in the Bitcoin mining network. As I mentioned, it's very, very competitive. Bitcoin, for example, they own the manufacturing, they own the devices. If you want to compete with them, you need to go to places to buy it from them, that obviously they charge a premium, and go to places with very low electricity. So today, most of the mining is China or Iceland or some in Canada or Eastern Europe. It's a very, very competitive space that most of the community and the ecosystem can't be part of it. But proof of stake, it's the same mechanism to decentralize and secure the network, but it enables participation by anybody that holds a token by delegating it to guardians, and guardians are the ones that choose the validators. This is how we keep the network decentralized. Essentially, in Orbs, there's 4 roles. There are the applications, there are the block producers, they upload transactions to the networks. There's validators that they validate the transactions, they validate the consensus. Then there's the guardians that choose the validators. This is a big difference. Most of the networks, the node operators and the guardians are the same people. In Orbs, we actually created 2 roles for these functions. And then there are the token holders that can delegate their tokens to the guardians. because we understand that people mainstream, they're not going to check every day what is the validator is doing, who has a good uptime, who is securing the network like they're supposed to do. This is why we also created the role of delegators and guardians. You can delegate your tokens to guardians. They are like your representative, like in a representative democracy, and they will drive the agenda for the delegators. So by one time delegating the tokens, you can enjoy 8% yield annually to the tokens, which also being part of the network, securing it and helping us grow the community, but also being rewarded for that. So it's a similar world to the miners, but everybody can take part in it.
So any other questions? You had time to think about questions while we were talking and talking. Any questions? We'll take technical questions also. We can answer technical questions. No?
Korean language is okay?
Sure.
Okay, transfer to guys, okay? 저 public 체인이라고 말씀드렸잖아요, 그죠? 근데 그 비트코인의 속도가 굉장히 중요하다고 생각해요. 그래서 그 속도를 굉장히 빠르게 하려면 어떤 대안을 갖고 하시려고 하시는지 궁금합니다.
Shifting that for Bitcoin speed is very important. So, what should we do for Bitcoin speed up? What do you think about it?
So Satoshi developed the Bitcoin protocol, right, to be slow for a reason. It's not like in 2008 no one understood that speed is going to be important, right? So consensus is by definition you need time to get consensus. Otherwise you're not securing the transaction. So speed versus security is not something you just move it from speed to security and everything works just fine, right? If you move from security to speed, you're giving up security, right? Like we were saying before, you want to move to a network that has only 21 nodes, you can do 100,000 transactions a second, but you have no security. So Bitcoin is the safest, longest chain, and the longest chain doesn't mean, for example, it's twice as long as Ethereum. Bitcoin is 100,000 times more secure than Ethereum. It's much, much harder to break Bitcoin than it is to break Ethereum, right? So that's why most of the value, $150 billion, is sitting in Bitcoin, right? Every hacker in the world is trying to break Bitcoin. Every hacker in the world, I guarantee it's the biggest prize that every hacker has. No one has been able to do it. They broke into the Pentagon, they broke into every place, right? They broke into every voting machine in America. But no one has been able to break the Bitcoin blockchain. So I don't think you need to make it faster. It's perfect for what it was designed for. Now, you want something faster? Great, here, you have Orbs to run something faster, something different. But for store value, for money, you don't need anything faster. It works just fine, okay? If we need, for the amount of people that need to move transactions between each other on the Bitcoin, not for commerce, but just for store value, it is fast enough. You don't need anything more than that. So I don't think you need to improve Bitcoin. You can design other blockchains to do other things, but we don't need to make Bitcoin faster.
What do you think about here?
Yeah, so there was for a couple of years a big debate if scaling Bitcoin should be done on-chain or with off-chain solutions. As Alex mentioned, to keep Bitcoin as light as possible, as decentralized as possible, client the full nodes, and then scale using the Lightning Network, for example, which is off-chain transactions. This is what currently I think the roadmap is for Bitcoin. Others thought that Bitcoin needs to be scaled by making the block size bigger. There was Bitcoin Cash and there was Bitcoin SV. But fundamentally, I actually agree with what Alex said. I see Bitcoin today less as digital cash, but more as digital gold. Because it's very hard to be a medium of exchange, cash, money, and a store of value. They a little bit contradict each other. Because if I think it's a store of value, if I think the value will go up, then why would I spend it on day-to-day
On
things?
pizza.
Exactly. If it's a medium of exchange, it should be more stable. So e-commerce can use it and have predictability. So I think, for example, Libra, the project by Facebook, which is a stable coin, is much easier as a medium of exchange, but it will never be as valuable as Bitcoin because it's stable. It's meant to be stable. It's meant to be a medium of exchange. Bitcoin, the way I see it, it's a new asset class. It's digital gold. I see it as part of my saving portfolio. Obviously, I do think that Bitcoin can become also better digital cash than some other fiat currencies, for example, in Venezuela, in Argentina, in some of the developing countries or countries that are failing. Bitcoin can even be better medium of exchange. But I think overall there will be a virtual currency that is very stable, medium of exchange, and Bitcoin that is more digital gold. And being both of them, I think would be hard. So I think right now, scaling Bitcoin off-chain or using other infrastructure protocols is the right way, and not necessarily interfering so much with the Bitcoin protocol on-chain.
And to add to what you're saying, the dollar is a horrible store of value, but it's a great medium of exchange. 90% of all the transactions in the world are dollar denominated, but if you put your money in dollar, you lose a lot every day, right? It's just a horrible store of value. So, let's talk about Libra for a second, because I'm sure there are a lot of populists here of Libra. So just to share with you what I think of Libra, right? And Facebook, how many people here are on Facebook? You use Facebook? Anyone? They brought you fake friends, and then they brought you fake news, and then they brought you a fake American president, and now they're bringing you a fake blockchain, you know? So fake. So people somehow expect from a company that continues to deliver bad things to deliver something good. It is not going to be good for you. The Libra does not do anything for you. It just takes your money for free, just like the bank. And it gives the yield, it gives whatever it generates from your money to the 26 nodes that it's going to have. The people that pay $10 million to get a node, they get all the profit. They pay $10 million, and then every month they're going to get money from Libra. You're going to get nothing back. You can move money around, but you're going to get nothing back from it, right? Orbs pays you back 7-8% for your money, right? And so on. So you have to think about it, is it really for you? Is it helping you? It's just another toll collector, right? You don't need another toll collector. You can go on a highway here and pay tolls all day long. You don't need another one. It's not helping us at all. Do you agree or you disagree? No.
Yeah.
You're going to be more diplomatic, right?
No, I think that it's nice to bash some of the large enterprises, but
I'm a truth teller. I'm not bashing anybody.
And I don't use Facebook. I don't use Instagram. But I do think if you look, what are the largest companies in the world today? In the end of the day, they are marketplaces. Uber connects between people and cars. Amazon between people and shopping, e-commerce, Airbnb between apartments and people, Google is AdWords marketplace, Facebook is also a marketplace for ads. So they generate their value from their ecosystem. The users, Facebook, it's us, Airbnb is the people that put their apartments, Uber is the drivers. So I do think they're adding a lot of value to the world. Uber, I think it's a great app, for example, Airbnb, it's great. But they're gaining also too much power. And because they're becoming so big, like these 5 companies, they're about 90% of the S&P 500 or 50% or whatever. They're growing very, very big and they're becoming even more and more powerful. And in the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves how we can make the balance more correct. And I think blockchain is one of the ways to do that. And I think that these big companies, they will add this. I always had this question, how do blockchain technology becomes mainstream? I always understood blockchain as a new asset class, as an investment thesis. Everybody needs to diversify. I understood Ethereum as a new kind of company. The technology is now enabling us to collaborate on a peer-to-peer global scale and trustless. So Ethereum is a non-profit foundation. In 3.5 years, the Ether token grew 4,000x. It's one of the fastest wealth creations ever in the world, and they haven't signed one legal agreement ever. So it's 30,000 people collaborating on top of Ethereum without trusting each other. This is huge, because today there was for-profit companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon. There were non-profit companies doing amazing things such as Wikipedia, Mozilla, and Linux Foundation, but they don't know how to sustain it. And suddenly we have a non-profit, open source company that is creating wealth, but everybody enjoys it. The users, the investors, the application builders, the developers, the third-party providers. But again, Ethereum is just very small from an adoption perspective. And I always ask myself, how do blockchain actually get used day to day? And I think the way it will be adopted is that I think some of the largest enterprises in the world, like Google, like Facebook, like Uber, like Apple, will start adopting this technology. And you will ask yourself, why would this company give away power or be less centralized? Why would they do that? They're for profit. They like making as many money as possible and give dividends to their shareholders. This is basically their protocol. This is what they aim to do. And the reason is I think that by opening up their governance will actually make them even more competitive. And this is the reason they will adopt it. They won't adopt it because they're good. They will adopt it because they will make them even more profitable or even more competitive. A good example I like to give is like between Apple and Google. You know, Apple, when they released the App Store and the iPhone, they had complete dominance over this new marketplace. They had a great user experience. It was for free. They controlled 100% of the market. And when Google and Microsoft started thinking, how do we compete with Apple? If we just copy their product, Apple already has complete dominance. So what did Google do? They open source Android. So now they can't monetize the operating system anymore because it's open source. This creates much larger trust with other players. So Samsung can put Android inside their phone. Huawei can put Android inside their phone because they know that Google can't screw them anymore. It's open source. They can fork away. But for Google, it's still very valuable because they own the operating system, the data, the live instance that is running the operating system. So actually Android today is 85% of the market share, even though it's open source compared to Apple that is closed source now, it's 15%. So I think more and more companies will enable blockchain technology because it will take away some of their power, but it will give them more competitiveness because the most important thing for them is the marketplaces, the users, the drivers, the apartments. And to win, they need to give trust. For example, if there was a ride-sharing application that enables the drivers to be part of the governance, it's better than a ride-sharing that doesn't give any control to the drivers. Today, Uber employs about 100,000 people. They have zero governance. So I think this will become a trust graph, will become something that large enterprises are competing on. And this is why they will start adopting blockchain technology, just as they started adopting open source code, not because they liked it, but because it makes them even more competitive.
I have another question.
You have all the questions.
I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to use Korean language, okay? Just, 말했듯이 요즘 구글이라던가 아니면 애플, as you mentioned, 말했듯이 그러한 거대한 기업들이 앞으로 10년 후에는 블록체인을 가지고 움직이는 기업들이 유니콘 기업들이 굉장히 많이 나올 거예요. 그런 기업들과 어떻게 대면을 할 것 같으며 앞으로 한 5년이나 10년 후에 오브스가 어떤 위치에서 블록체인의 기반을 가지고 퍼블릭 체인을 통해서 세상이 에코시스템을 어떻게 하실 것인지를 좀 부탁드릴게요. 말씀을 해주시면 좋겠어요.
So in 10 years, there will be many unicorn blockchain companies, like big companies. But when the times come, like Google or Amazon, so big conglomerates, how do you think they will compete with them? And then when the time comes, how do you think Orbs will be positioned in the industry?
In 5 years, 10 years at least.
So first of all, the way that I see the market, I don't see other infrastructure as direct competition because each one is attacking and going to the market. in a different way. Orbs isn't smarter than Ethereum or Polkadot or Cosmos or Cordora, Hyperledger, Quorum. It's just that we're going to the market via a different vertical, as I mentioned before in one of the slides. But even if I look at all of the infrastructure today, I think there's about only 10 large infrastructure projects that are very well funded. I can count them. It's about 10 large infrastructures. I don't think necessarily there would be additional ones, because it's very hard to raise this significant amount of funds to build these long-term projects and to create a network effect. So I think there is competition between these 10. Some of them will become bigger, potentially some of them will disappear, but I don't think there will be tens and hundreds of large infrastructure. There will be few for different markets. So this is one. And why I think they have big advantage over Apple and Samsung and Facebook and some of the large enterprises is because they will be able to provide a higher level of guarantee. What makes Orbs unique, Ethereum unique, Cosmos, Polkadot, Tezos is that we have a token, and the token aligns the economical incentives within the network. So it's a public permissionless infrastructure. This is something that is very hard for the enterprises to create. For them to create a token and a permissionless infrastructure and token economy, I think it's something that from a regulatory perspective scares them, because they have a lot to lose. They're not like a startup that can go and be very disruptive and create this network effect like Bitcoin did and Ethereum did. We see Facebook, even now they're trying to build a private blockchain, super compliant, KYC, AML, and they're getting a lot of scrutiny from the regulator. I'm not even sure if the project will live off. I think Libra will do it, but if it was public permissionless at the scale of Facebook, I'm sure the regulator would have shut it down very early, because there's a point of failure, which is this big company. And by the time they would try to shut down Bitcoin or Ethereum or Orbs or Cosmos or Tezos, it becomes impossible, because it's a decentralized network, it's an open network that creates a much faster network effect. So I think enterprises won't compete with public blockchains, and I think public blockchains, there's not going to be too many, because it's a very long-term project, and we're running a marathon. You need a lot of funding, and I think there's not going to be many new ones. There's about 10. This is the competition.
So going back to the Voice of IP movie, remember we talked about watching the movie? If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, you have to go watch the movie from 1995. In 1995, IBM and AOL and all the big companies said to all the corporate customers, you can't trust the internet. The internet is a crazy place. It's open, it's public. You want to create a private version. You want to create an intranet. Anyone here old enough to remember the intranet? Right? And 94, 95, 96, all the way to 2000, it looked like the intranet is going to win, because all the big companies were building stuff on the intranet. But the public network was always bigger, stronger, faster than any intranet, right? And that's what you're seeing today. Today you're seeing the same movie again, right? Libra, Hyperledger, all these things are just intranets. They're all things, private networks that are trying to compete, like I said to you, with the most powerful computer in the world. The Bitcoin network is more powerful than the 500 largest supercomputers. Some of them are here in Seoul, okay? It's more powerful than all the Chinese computers and all the Korean computers and all the Japanese supercomputers and all the American supercomputers. So you can't compete with it. I don't care if you're IBM or if you're Facebook or if you're anyone else, okay? You will not be able to compete with that infrastructure. So the horse is out of the barn, like we say in America, right? It's too late. The race already started 10 or 11 years ago, and all the corporate customers that are coming now, if they choose to do private blockchains, they're going to lose. If they choose to do public blockchains, they're going to win. So right now, you don't see a lot of people moving to the public blockchain, what Orbs is building, but we are big believers that the public blockchain is the winning protocol. Who was AWS #1 customer? Do you know? Amazon. web services, who was their number one customer? Amazon. They built it for themselves. Then they opened it for everybody else. Then they said, here, we built such a great product for ourselves, now you can use it, right? So it's the same thing with Orbs, right? You build it, you test it, you make sure it runs on the Orbs coin, then you can open it up for many, many other customers to use. And again, it's not about store of value. What Bitcoin does is not what Orbs does. So you have to think about what are the applications that require public blockchain, require independent governance, require scaling, all these things that we talked about that I showed you in my presentations and Daniel presentations, and really think about that from that perspective. Because when the winning app comes in,